I was calling in about the corporate personhood aspect of things and how it's interesting to me how historically profits have been such a massive driver of this idea that certain activities should be shielded from scrutiny. I know that profits are one of the major drivers of slavery back in the day. They've been one of the major drivers of private prisons. They've been one of the major drivers of the desire to strike gun reform. And instead of, it's one of the reasons, you have that segment you put through every day where the average person pays a very small amount into welfare, but they pay a massive amount out of their taxes to corporate subsidies, arms dealers. And I just find it kind of interesting that historically it actually seems like money has been, and the production of money, and I'm very specifically saying production of money rather than production of wealth, the production of money has been given more priority than almost life itself.
That's very much been the position of the Supreme Court since the 1960s.
That's in what? I'm sorry.
That's very much been the position of the Supreme Court since the 1960s or 70s.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what exact solution I would be proposing at this time, but it's just kind of.
I think we need to strip away corporate personhood. You've got corporations that claim under the First Amendment that they have the right to buy politicians and lie to the electorate in television advertising for political purposes. You have corporations that under the Fifth Amendment have claimed the right of privacy. You had Dow Chemical, for example. The EPA flew a plane. There was a local complaint that a Dow Chemical factory was emitting benzene into the air through a vent in their roof, illegally emitting benzene. Benzene causes cancer, liver cancer. And the downwind people complained about it. The EPA flew a plane over the factory with a benzene detector, nailed them, and was going to hit them with a huge fine. The EPA took this all the way to the Supreme Court and claimed that their Fourth Amendment right to privacy was invaded by the EPA because they investigated this factory without a warrant, without a search warrant. And the Supreme Court backed them up. I mean, now when agencies, whether it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture checking out factory farms or whether it's the U.S., the EPA checking out chemical factories, now they have to give advance notice before they do a surprise inspection. You have corporations that have claimed the Fifth Amendment right not to testify against themselves, where they go into court and say, we don't have to produce those documents. That's a form of self-incrimination. We're not going to give you the documents that prove that we colluded to commit this crime. You've got corporations that under the 14th Amendment are claiming equal protection under the law, saying, well, if protections, so should we. I mean, this is obscene. This is absurd. Corporations are not persons. John Marshall, the first Attorney General, or the first Supreme Court Justice of the United States, who's the guy who famously said, a corporation has no soul. It is not a person. I mean, it wasn't until, 80 years later that they came along and said, yeah, that his court came along, he was long dead, but the court came along and said, yeah, corporations are persons. I think the key to the whole thing, Tom, is to strip away corporate personhood. And there have been a number of efforts to do this. It's going to require either amending the Constitution or taking on the Supreme Court through Article 3, Section 2, because this was a doctrine that was never, ever voted on by the American people. There has never been any sort of national or even statewide referendum on this issue. No legislature, no state legislature, no federal legislature has ever said we think corporations should be people and have protections under the Bill of Rights. No president has ever said I think corporations should be people and have protections under the Bill of Rights. In fact, multiple presidents, most recently Barack Obama, but all the way back to Grover Cleveland in his State of the Union address in 1887, to look it up, he said, corporations, which should be the carefully controlled servants of the people, have become their masters. The average American now has the iron boot of a corporation upon his neck. That was in his State of the Union address. It was 1886.
1887. What a lefty, huh? Grover Cleveland.
It was Grover Cleveland, for God's sake. It was the year after the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad case in the Supreme Court. And he was reacting to that. I mean, it's time to say to corporations, hey, you want to do business, you can incorporate, that's fine, but that doesn't, give your corporation an independent life, and it certainly doesn't give it human rights under the Constitution of the United States. We're the only country in the world that does this. And it wasn't, like I said, this is purely the Supreme Court. Purely the Supreme Court. No legislature ever said they wanted it to be this way. Back at the founding of the Republic, you read the debates in the Constitutional Convention, nobody thought this was a good idea at all.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
In fact, they were unanimous in essentially saying it's a bad idea. Thomas Jefferson said, I don't trust the rich for the future of my republic. I trust the people.